watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 97, Connecting Controls in jQuery. The checkbox is connected to the ankle bone. Okay, I'm really excited to have Russ Maher come back on the show. Russ recently did a three-part series for NotesIn9, and I'm kind of really excited to have him back on. And Russ has a great site at XPagesTips.com, and he's, of course, one half of the dynamic duel of XPages Bootcamp speakers for the XPages Bootcamp and the Advanced Bootcamp that the View runs. I don't know if they have anything scheduled yet, but if I do, I'll certainly let you know. And his information is here. And what Russ is going to talk to us about is jQuery and using it to connect controls together. Now, before we get into that, whenever I hear jQuery and XPages, I think of one man first, and that's Dr. Marky Roden. Sometimes I call him Dr. jQuery. So Dr. Marky Roden has a website at zomino.com, xomino.com, and demo.zomino.com. And what Marky has done is created a plethora of XPages and jQuery articles and demos for you to use. So if you wanted to start with jQuery and you didn't know how to install it or really use it, then you could start at his site. Marky's also done a NotesIn9, episode 74, Getting Started with jQuery Plugins, which will show you a little bit about how to install it and things like that, which Russ's show kind of assumes that it's just already there for you. So if you want to get a nice, good base, then go start with Marky stuff, and then if not, then we'll go right to the demo here, where Russ will show us how to connect different controls through jQuery and some other client-side JavaScript tricks to hide and show content when we want, and it's with a nice fader, so it's really a nice UI, and that's the kind of stuff that I think the users really kind of like, that little extra effort that goes into the interfaces. So with that, let's go to the demo.
Hello, my name is Russell Maher. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking to you about a technique that we've been using to connect various controls to each other, XPage controls, using jQuery to kind of manipulate them together. Our challenge was we have these questions, and each question is going to have a couple different fields that go with it. So in this question, there will be some text. In addition to that, there'll be a yes/no radio choice. Some cases there's a yes/no NA, but there's always some kind of an answer there for the question. In addition to that, there's a checkbox that allows the user to check it to create an action plan. So if the user does check the checkbox to make the action plan, then all the action plan details appear. And when they go to try to save this audit, if they haven't completed those fields, they're required to fill them out. In addition to that, this year we got a new requirement. They said, hey, we're going to rephrase all the questions, and we want everybody to essentially answer no, but if they do answer yes to one of them, then we want you to automatically check the Create Action Plan checkbox for them. We want you to make sure that they can't turn it off. If they answer no, well, then creating the action plan is optional. And so we said, all right, that's fine. So in a situation like this, what we actually have is the radio button is connected to the checkbox field. The checkbox is connected to the action plan details. That whole box O question thing gets thrown into an audit XPage, and that XPage has repeat controls on it that repeat these questions a bunch of times, sometimes as many as 70 times, maybe 40, 50 to begin with. Depends on, some of the questions have multiple parts, but the point here is there's tens of questions that get generated on each audit. There are 4 main types of audits that we do each year, and then typically it seems like every year they throw in a new different kind of sort of a sub-audit kind of a thing. But the point is there are four different ones. So we've got 50 to 70 questions. They're all different sections, different text for sure. Every year the audits are updated. So question 1 might have new text year over year. And that's fine. So, but that's times 4. So you're talking about anywhere from 200 to 300 questions that you have to maintain and track and make work. Of course, if you change the questions for 2012, when somebody opens up a 2011 audit, that still needs to look correct. And in fact, the situation in the application is that by the time you release or request that people complete the audits for 2012, they may still be working on action items or action plans from the previous year, the prior year, 2011. So a little bit of concern here, or challenge to make sure that all these things work and that you don't drive yourself crazy trying to make it work different every year. So high level, what we did was we made question configuration records. You go into a question, you say, here's the text. It's going to be yes, no, or it's going to be yes, no, NA. It may or may not actually have a checkbox to do the create action plan, and there's some other options there for other additional fields. In the XPage for the audit, we have a repeat control that walks through all the question configuration records, identifies all the sections, repeats all those, because there could be maybe 11, 12 sections in an audit. Inside of each one of those sections, we repeat all the configurations for each of the questions. Each of those questions is going to have a representation of the text, which comes from the configuration. But in addition to that, we'll have custom controls inside of the control for the question. The custom control will actually have the radio button, and that field name needs to be dynamic based on where it's at in the repeat control and so forth. The same thing goes for the action plan details and the action plan checkbox. So all of those get custom properties that are passed in from the container controls, and using those techniques, we're allowed to basically generate pretty extensive audit records with fairly minimal configuration. The benefit to this, to using jQuery, is basically performance. By using jQuery, switching over to jQuery, we were allowed to eliminate a whole bunch of Dojo automatic generated code that gets generated. So everything that I've talked about could be done doing regular old XPage, client-side partial refresh kind of a stuff. But every time you set up a partial refresh, when the XPage gets generated, some Dojo functions are generated as well, and some Dojo listener events and add events and so forth. So we were able to eliminate all of those. And the jQuery code is very minimal. I mean, very, very small. So that's not going to change over and over again. There is one other little thing. So in addition to being all client-side and not involving any even AJAX requests back to the server and eliminating a whole bunch of heavier Dojo code, there is a problem. Sometimes the browser, there will just be so many DOM objects in the page that the browser just can't keep track of them all. And I actually have seen on more than one occasion where you've got repeat controls that are repeating a bunch of other controls, and the controls towards the bottom of the page, the Dojo listeners just quit working because the browser can't really keep track of all of the objects. So using this technique, we're pretty sure we're not going to reach that limit. There probably is some limit, but it's a lot larger than what we were running into with the Dojo code. So the jQuery solution that we put together is essentially we took the radios and the checkboxes, we computed custom attribute values. Those custom attribute values actually contained the name of the associated panel, the action plan panel. And then we attached a little listener to those radios and checkboxes. We listen for clicks. When you click the radio or the checkbox, we basically read that attribute value. That attribute value has the client-side ID of the panel that we're supposed to show and hide, and then after that it's just 2 or 3 lines of code of jQuery. So that's how it's put together. Let's take a look at the actual code. So the first thing here is I want to show the page itself. So I'm actually in the JQ Connect NSF and the example XSP. And the way this works is right now we actually have these gray panels that are inside of these orange panels. The gray panel has a little computed label here to show you that this is actually the name of this particular panel. And if you've been doing XPages a while, this will look familiar. It's a combination of sort of the chain of events, so to speak. So this is the XPage itself. We've got a repeat name within an increment. and then we actually have the name of this gray panel. When you click the little show panel and it's off, we're going to fade out that panel. When it's turned on, we're going to see it. And the same thing goes for the radio button. So we're doing the exact same thing with both the checkboxes and their radio button groups. And so we're going to show you how to make that happen with some jQuery. The first thing is the example XPage has a repeat. The repeat control is fairly straightforward. We're just iterating over an array. Of course, you can iterate over anything you want, but we've got 5 iterations, and that makes it really easy. Inside there, we have 2 basic controls. We've got a panel control, and we've got the show the panel control. So let's take a look at the gray box one. This thing here actually has a panel called inside panel. Now, when that gets generated on the XPage in the client, it's not just inside panel. It's the view :ID1 plus the repeat iterator, then inside panel. We can use our friend getClientID to access the actual client-side computed ID of that. So that's what's going on there. That inside panel evaluates to this thing right in here, which is the name of that particular panel. In the radio buttons and checkboxes, these are pretty straightforward. The first thing is neither of them are bound to any data sources. So no data, that's fine. It doesn't need to work for this demo. They've got a couple different values, yes, no, and this one's got, show panel as the label. The magic here is in the all properties area, where if we take a look at the attributes property, what I did was I added an attribute, called it associated panel name, and then I computed its value to be that getClientID from the inside panel. So what ends up happening over here in the browser, if I inspect, let's say, that radio button, not sure I got on it, let's see. If I look at the field set here, what I see is that there is a attribute called associated panel name, and its view is actually the full client-side ID of the inside panel that's in that custom control. So that's cool. So we have radio buttons and checkboxes that have this cool little attribute. That attribute has the name of the panel that goes with it. So in order to make that happen, to put the little finishing touches on it, we have to go look at the jQuery code. The jQuery code is fairly straightforward. There's one little link to access the the jQuery file, the library. Once the document fully loads, we attach code to the click event of both the radio buttons and the checkboxes, and basically that says, hey, when you click that thing, run this code. Well, what we're doing for the radio button is we're actually going to read the value that was selected. Could be yes, could be no. We're going to read the attribute associated panel name. We're going to read its value from the radio button. Now, because of the way XPages generates radio buttons, we have to kind of go up to the radio buttons containing field set element to get the attribute. And then we know the value, and we know the panel that we're supposed to work with. So we just say, hey, if the value is yes on the radio button, then fade in that panel. If it's not a yes, meaning it's a no, then fade it out. The same thing or something very similar happens with the checkbox. In the checkbox, we can go straight to the associated panel name attribute. We don't have to go to its parent. And then in this case, we just check to find out if it's checked or not. So if it's checked, we're going to fade the panel in, and if it's not checked, we're going to fade the panel out. Now, the last little thing here is you'll notice inside of these jQuery selectors, I've got this little JQT. It's a function. Down here, there's a little utility function that basically says, you give me a string, which in our case will be the ID, the client-side ID of the action plan details panel. Remember, that looks kind of ugly in XPages. So if I look back over here, that's what it looks like. It's got colons in it. Well, the colons don't play nice with jQuery. So I found this little function out there on ye old web, and essentially you give it a string. This thing's going to replace or fix any of those characters, basically escape those colons. I also prepend the pound sign so we can get a complete unique client ID. And so what ends up happening is we read that value from the attribute. It's got all the colons in it. When we actually go to use it, we run it through the little cleanup function. And then fade in, fade out are just built-in utilities to that make jQuery work. So that's how it works. There's not a lot to it, but the great thing is it's very fast. There's not a lot of code, and it just works. So there's no issue with overloading that other stuff. There is one little thing that you have to tie into this. The whole radio checkbox thing, hiding, showing those panels using client-side JavaScript works very well. But what happens when you open the page initially, the X page? Well, in that case, we only want to show the panel if they said yes or if they click the checkbox. So to accommodate that, you do need to do a little bit of computed client-side JavaScript or client-side styling. And so what I've got here is I'm basically saying, hey, if the document object, if we go and read the value of a field, so get the string value of a field, if it equals yes, then the style is going to be display block, which means we will see the action panel details. Otherwise, it's going to say none. And essentially what goes on in here is we're passing in the field name as a custom property to the custom control. Because remember, these controls are buried inside of other custom controls, which are buried inside of repeat controls. So you got to set it when you initially open up the page, and then after that, your client-side manipulation will just take over and make it work like everybody wants it to work, which is fast. That's it. Again, my name is Russ Maher. If you have any questions, definitely get a hold of me. If you have suggestions about this, I'd love to hear them. My contact information is all at xpagetips.com, and a big shout out to David Leedy for letting me put this up on NotesIn9, and you guys have a great day.
And that's the demo. If you have any questions for me, I appreciate it. And that's the demo. I thank Russ for that contribution, and if you have any questions for me, here's my information, and I thank you for your time.